You're listening to Three Things to Know with Stephanie Haney, with experts and insiders on what you need to know in Northeast Ohio.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to a very special edition of the Three Things to Know podcast. I'm your host, Stephanie Haney, and as always, I'm so excited to have you here with me, and especially excited. I know that's a theme. I say that, right? I'm especially excited every week because I get so excited about our guests every single week. Well, this week we are celebrating the 1-year anniversary of the podcast. This podcast, Three Things to Know, launched on November 13th, 2020. So we have made it 365 days, and we have had some great moments here on the podcast. You guys, we have talked about important issues, things that matter to a lot of us, especially here in Northeast Ohio. We've talked to really cool guests. We're going to revisit some of our past guests in just a moment. But first, I want to talk about some of the ideas and the issues that we've talked about on this podcast. We've talked about what Zoom has done to all of us throughout the pandemic and how it's kind of created or brought to light some maybe body image issues for a lot of people, how it's resulted in kind of a boom in the plastic surgery industry. We've talked about some of the challenges of not just the pandemic, but everyday life, like making friends and how difficult that can be as an adult, but how important that is as an adult. And we've also talked about dating in a pandemic, how the video chat date has totally become a thing, and really how that's kind of going to be sticking with us for quite some time. And, you know, really not a bad safety check and safety feature to have involved as well in your dating life. So we've talked about that. We talked about toxic positivity, you know, these current issues that are coming up. We're seeing these new terms, we're seeing these new conversations, and how it can be not a great thing to necessarily always be the silver lining person. I know we talked about this at the time. I'm somebody who can be maybe a little bit guilty of that, you know, always wanting to look to the bright side, but that's just not what people need all the time. We talked about that. And when we talked about these important interpersonal and also health issues, we talked about long COVID and what the heck that means, what a COVID long hauler is, and what it means to have these persisting symptoms after you think your original bout with COVID-19, if you were unfortunate enough to get COVID-19, after that sort of goes away, but having these persisting symptoms, and how the Cleveland Clinic is at the forefront of having a clinic, particularly for those people. And so many of our incredible guests, by the way, when we've talked about these psychological issues, when we've talked about these health issues, they've been from the Cleveland Clinic, and just what a blessing it is to have that facility right here in our own backyard here in Northeast Ohio with the best experts in the country talking about these things with us, talking about your questions. And you guys, it's been so much fun, you know, when we've got somebody specific coming on the podcast, or we're talking about a specific idea and you all share your questions with me. My DMs are open, _Stephanie Haney. You guys know that. I love to have a two-way conversation with you. And it's been so much fun. Some of the other stuff that we talked about, you know, we had some huge events here over the past 365 days. We had the NFL draft on here in Cleveland. So we had our voice of the Browns and our 3 News sports director, Jim Donovan, on to talk about that. We had a major change with our professional baseball team, now officially the Cleveland Guardians. Nobody better to talk about that than Mark Namick, our very own 3 News investigative reporter, who has been following really all the drama and the back and forth and the conversations on all sides related to the team name, the former team name, and how, you know, people here in Northeast Ohio, they were not happy with the past team name. And now we talk about the transition to the new name, the Cleveland Guardians, which again, that did officially launch. So just having important conversations here. You know, I got to share my story with you of choosing to freeze my eggs so that I can one day, hopefully, use them to become a mother. So we talked about that. We talked about, you know, what the IVF process is like, to sort of kind of demystify that for people. And we talk about other interesting things too, like cryptocurrency, kind of a breakdown of what it all means, and, you know, what Elon Musk's role in all of it is with the Dogecoin, and, you know, not accepting Bitcoin for Tesla and then accepting Bitcoin for Tesla, and back and forth, and what is a Bitcoin and what is cryptocurrency. Just a lot of great conversations, and the guests that we've had on, you know, it's it's not a podcast without the guests. And I really have to say thank you to our many guests that we've had on. From our very first guest, Dr. Tanya Israel. She was our first guest on November 13th, 2020, and that was right after the presidential election, right after Joe Biden won the presidency. And our topic of conversation, of course, even amping up for Thanksgiving, which I know Thanksgiving was a little different in the past years because of what we've been dealing with, but we talked about how to talk about politics and how to try and bridge a gap with someone that you want to have a conversation, and also when to walk away, because that's important to know too. So that's where it all started. That was the very, very first podcast. And then let's backtrack to our most recent guest, Amanda Klutz, just an incredible gem of a human being. She is a co-host on The Talk, in case you're not familiar. She's a Canton native, like myself. Shout out to the 330. She went to Glen Oak High School. And she's performing on Dancing with the Stars right now and just doing an incredible job of it, might I add. And when she was on the podcast just 2 weeks ago, she had talked about how what she really wanted to do, she was hoping that she got the opportunity to stick around to dance to her late husband Nick Cordero's song, and she was able to do that. So here's what she said when she was here talking about how she was really hoping to get that opportunity. Is there a particular dance that you're looking forward to as the show goes on?
Yes, well, knock on wood, if we get past this Monday night, and it's a double elimination, so it's a pretty scary Monday night. I hope, and I'll say I hope, and fingers crossed, that I will get to dance to Nick's song, Live Your Life. So that's something I'm definitely looking forward to, but I need to make it past Monday night. So I don't want to put the cart before the horse, but that would be pretty amazing.
Well, we're going to do everything in our power to get you there.
Yeah. Ohio, we gotta vote for your person. Now that Mike's gone, you gotta put all your votes towards me.
That's right. There's no other choice. It's Amanda. We gotta get her there.
Ohio, I'm your girl. You gotta vote for Amanda.
What a beautiful, beautiful human Amanda Klutz is. And of course, she's got her memoir out now about losing her husband, Nick Cordero. We talked about that. We talked about a lot of things. And it was just so great to see her get the opportunity in the semifinals round for Dancing with the Stars for this season 30, this big season, this big anniversary season. To see her get to do that, it was absolutely beautiful. And she broke down. She had a very emotional moment on that stage. And her partner, Alan Burston, he choreographed that dance just absolutely beautifully. By the way, tonight is the finale for Dancing with the Stars. So she's our Ohio lady and she's still in the competition. This is the finale. So if you text tonight Amanda to 21523, text the word Amanda to the number 21523, or you can go to dwtsvote.abc.com during the show tonight to vote for her. Just how incredible would that be to see that mirror ball trophy go to one of our own, one of Northeast Ohio's own, one of Canton's own, Amanda Klutz. And, a couple weeks back, before we talked to Amanda, we talked to Mike the Miz Mizanin. He is from Parma. He's a WWE superstar, also on Dancing with the Stars this season. And Amanda shared with me how they really bonded over both being from Northeast Ohio. And here is what the Miz told me really shocked producers when he went on the show. How, this being the 30th season of Dancing with the Stars, have you been a fan of the show, or were you just like, whoa, being thrown into this world?
I think all the producers were pretty shocked at how much I knew about the show. Like, I would sit there and be like, oh my God, like Nicole, I don't know her last name, Schlesinger, like her Argentine tango was absolutely incredible with Derek Huff. Man, when the Paso Doble with Emma and James Vanderbeek, and then that one dance with the Carlton dance with Whitney and Alfonso Rivera. And then when I started just name dropping like all these dances that I liked, they were like, wow, you really know it. Like, I think I cut a promo in one of the interviews. I was like, yeah, I'm trading the skull crushing finale and figure four leg lock to the foxtrot, our Argentine tango, Vietnamese waltz, freestyle, jive, like salsa, cha-cha. Like, I was just naming all and they go, you just named all the dances. I go, oh, I know all the dances.
And I think that's something that people will be surprised to learn. I've heard you say in previous interviews talking about this, we know you as Mike the Miz Mizanin, and that's a pretty could be a villainous character, but we're going to get to learn more about Mike Mizanin. So what are some things that we might be surprised to see, or how is that different for you?
Could be a villainous. I mean, I was in six. Here's the hard part about being on Dance with the Stars. You need people to vote for you. For the past 16 years, I have been the most egotistical, arrogant jerk on WWE. Like, that is what my character is. He will cheat to win. And so now I'm going to ask those people, hey, vote for me. So you're like, oh, man. But the thing about it is, I think people get it. And my show, Ms. and Mrs., has really been able to, I've been able to show like my family, my like insights of what it's like to be a WWE superstar, a husband, to be with my wife, to be with my children. So people have gotten to see that side of me. Now I hope to see, even in a broader audience on Dancing with the Stars, maybe people that don't watch wrestling, you know, don't watch WWE, maybe they'll tune in now because they saw me on Dancing with the Stars and like, wow, I love this. Let me go watch him on WWE or Ms. and Mrs. So yeah, I hope to just show a little bit more Mike from Parma, Ohio.
That man, he has so much energy, and he is so fun to follow on social media. By the way, if you're not following him on Instagram, you are absolutely missing out. You really do need to go follow him on social media. Now, unfortunately, The Miz and his partner, Whitney Carson, they didn't get the opportunity to go on beyond week 7. They didn't get the votes to do it. So, but we did get to enjoy seeing him on there for 7 weeks throughout Dancing with the Stars. You know, speaking of votes, somebody who did not get the votes in the state of Ohio, but did get the votes throughout the country, President Joe Biden. He was elected president last November 2020. He beat Donald Trump. Donald Trump did win the state of Ohio, but not the country. So not winning the election. We ended up with Joe Biden as the president. So we had another guest on. We had our Democratic Senator Sherrod Brown on to talk about, in addition to a Republican strategist in a separate episode, we talked with them separately about what a Biden presidency means for the state of Ohio. Now, this was before Joe Biden took office. This was right before the inauguration, so keep that in mind. And here is what Senator Brown had to say when he joined us on the podcast. As we look toward the Biden inauguration, is there one particular issue that you think will make the biggest impact, a Biden presidency will have the biggest impact on here in Ohio?
Well, I think the Biden presidency is going to be two things. It's initially going to be deal with this coronavirus decisively and as one people, and put that behind us and grow the economy as you do it. The second thing is Joe Biden ran for president talking about, he was the most pro-worker candidate for president in my lifetime. And that means, it means dignity of work. It's whether you punch a clock or swipe a badge, whether you work for tips, whether you're working on a salary like you are, whether it's working, it's taking care of kids or taking care of parents or raising children. And I think Joe Biden will go down as a very pro-worker president, and that will mean he'll have a successful presidency.
My final question for you, Senator Brown, are there any big question marks in your mind when it comes to what will happen with the Joe Biden presidency for us here in Ohio?
No big question marks. He's a pretty predictable guy. He was in Cleveland the day before the election campaigning. I got to talk to him a little bit. I mean, his mind was on the next day. His mind was on election day. So it wasn't the most in-depth conversation, but I've known him well enough over really decades, a couple of decades now, that I think he predictably will fight for workers. He will be an appealing presence in Ohio. I know he lost Ohio. Ohio is, as you point out, Stephanie, increasingly harder for a Democrat to win, but I won here decisively only a couple of years ago. Joe Biden's politics now are not much different from mine, and I think people will get more and more appreciate the work he does to help people get jobs, to raise wages, to provide health and pension benefits to people, and into small businesses to provide those jobs increasingly, and that will matter.
Okay, so we're about a year in now. Joe Biden has been president for almost a year now. So still very much trying to see what it will mean for the state of Ohio with us having a Biden presidency. We do know that he just got his infrastructure bill through Congress, just signed that into law. We do expect to see some results from that here in Ohio. One place where we do definitely expect to see those results are pertaining to the railway system, to Amtrak. Specifically, some cities mentioned here in Ohio, some major cities where we're going to see some development there, according to what we've heard from the CEO of Amtrak, right? So that remains to be seen. We will see what happens there. And there is a lot going on in Ohio, by the way. Speaking of votes, speaking of getting the votes, how our votes are counted here in Ohio. You know, every 10 years, there is a census. And when that happens, voting districts around the country are redrawn. So one of the things that we talked with Lieutenant Governor John Husted about was the redistricting situation here in Ohio. And if you're not up to speed on this, here in Ohio, there's something very interesting happening. There's a new system put in place where if the Republicans and the Democrats can't agree on voting district lines in Ohio, the party in power, which at the time that this new provision was put in place was the Republicans and is currently still the Republicans, they get to put forth a map that will be valid for 4 years. So very interesting here. They can do this unilaterally. So it's gone through the process for both the local districts and also the congressional districts, approved by Governor DeWine. There are some challenges going on in the courts of these voting maps. Here is what John Husted had to say about the process and what he thinks about that process as someone who served as the Secretary of State here in Ohio at one point in time. This is a huge conversation right now when it comes to elections. The redistricting process here in Ohio, you know, changing those lines here in the state. Would you call our current state and Senate districts fair and proportional?
Well, the current state districts were drawn under a different set of rules, and those were those districts were drawn by the majority party, and they were done constitutionally. Certainly, they favored the people who drew the map. That's the circumstance that we've lived under. We've since amended the Constitution in the state of Ohio, and we went through that process over the course of the last week. It was very contentious. Unfortunately, it didn't end up in a bipartisan vote, which I know Governor DeWine and I were hoping for. But I do think the new constitutional rules had an impact, because ultimately, even the Republicans in the legislature conceded at least 5 House seats and a couple of Senate seats toward the goal of drawing a more balanced map. Now, I understand that there are Democrats who still don't think it was a balanced map, but this is a more Republican-leaning state than it was 10 years ago. Makes doing that a little more complicated. But even you know, from the original map that Republicans introduced, you saw them move it more toward a Democrat goal, which shows that at least this new constitutional amendment had some impact. And we'll see if the court validates that decision. But just to give you some insight, it's very difficult. The constituencies that are influential with the Senate president and the Speaker of the House versus the minority leader and of the House and the Senate, they have very different constituencies. And what we saw in this process is that they could only go so far. Their constituencies would only allow them to go so far toward a compromise. Ultimately, we weren't able to get there, but I think that we did see that there was an impact of the constitutional change that forced Republican legislators to move a little bit more toward the middle.
Well, I think that people do often forget the job of our representatives is to speak for the people who they represent. That is a fair point. Assuming this new plan doesn't get validated by the court, is there anything specific that you would like to see if it goes back to the drawing board to redraw these districts right now?
We'll wait and see. We'll wait and see what the court says. I don't know. I have no particular guess or prediction on what that will be. It's a new process. People can read the same words and come up with different conclusions. I mean, one of the things that I found from the conversation that was going on was that even outside groups and Democrats and Republicans thought their reading of the Constitution was that, okay, Democrats deserve this many seats and Republicans deserve this many seats, and that's balance. I don't think that's what we voted for. I think what we voted for was that, yes, we recognize there are going to be a certain number of Democratic seats, certain number of Republican seats, but they wanted us to draw more competitive seats. You don't see in anybody's version of the map a an attempt to create more competitive seats, which is, I think, what the voters of Ohio want more of. And I don't think either the Democratic map or the Republican map met that goal by my standard. But again, this is a collaborative process. I didn't have a vote, but I would have been very involved in redistricting reform for more than 2 decades. And so I just offer that perspective as something that if there is a redo, I would encourage maps that have more competitive seats.
I think it would just be simpler for the people drawing the districts if they were recognizable shapes. That would
Well,
help things out.
you want to know what the problem is with that is that the Constitution actually says you can't break up communities to some extent. Well, city jurisdictional lines are really crazy. It's not like they're built on square or geometrical shapes that we're accustomed to. They're very jagged lines that outside, say, the city of Cincinnati, the city of Columbus, the city of Cleveland, these are very large, jagged lines that go all over the place. So when you try to keep a community together, you have to draw a district that represents that.
Now, that was a few months ago when we talked with Lieutenant Governor John Husted about that. We are still waiting to see what happens with some of those challenges against these maps. So very contentious, very controversial. We will wait and see what happens there. Speaking of contentious and controversial, another guest that we had here on the podcast, Westlake native, YouTube star turned boxer, Jake Paul. We had him on the podcast right before he had his fight with Tyron Woodley at Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse, and we got an opportunity to ask him what he had to say about Cleveland Browns defensive end Myles Garrett, saying that he would beat Logan Paul in a boxing match. Here's what Jake Paul had to say to Myles Garrett about that. You are a Browns fan, right? We saw you fly your mom out to the Kansas City game.
Yep.
Okay.
I love the Browns.
Okay. So Myles Garrett, you may be familiar. He recently had an interview with Complex, and he had an interesting comment. He said once his football career is over, he's not looking to get into celebrity boxing, but he said if he did, he would beat the brakes off your brother, Logan Paul. Do you have anything to say to that?
Stick to football, my friend. I like Myles. I have nothing against him. He's an amazing player. But, you saw what happened when Nate Robinson from the NBA tried to get into the ring. People don't realize it's a whole different sport. My brother sparred against all of the Gronkowski brothers who are 6'5", 6'6", 6'7", and he took them all down in the same sparring session. People don't realize this is a sport where time and experience is really the only thing that gets you better. So long story short, my brother would knock him out, no question. But nothing against Myles.
Nothing against Myles. And it doesn't sound like we'll see that happen in the ring, though. But he said that, though, so we had to ask you about it. That was definitely an interesting conversation to get to have with Jake Paul. He was a fun guy to talk to, I'll tell you that. And a lot of people took a lot of interest in what he had to say. Different outlets across the country did pick up that conversation. TMZ reported on it. We saw the Bleacher Report on it. We saw the New York Post reported on that. So lots of attention there from Jake Paul making those comments, responding to those comments from Myles Garrett. And he won. He won that fight. Of course, Logan Paul wasn't fighting. It was Jake Paul who was fighting Tyron Woodley. So when he did that, he improved his record to 4-0 in his professional boxing career against former UFC champion Tyron Woodley. It was a split decision. All right, so from the boxing ring now to engagement rings. We've been lucky enough to have a couple of the people from The Bachelor and The Bachelorette franchise come here on the 3 Things to Know podcast. One of those was fan favorite from Katie Thurston's season, Michael Allio. He is from Akron. He captured the hearts of Bachelor Nation, and he made it very, very far into the process before actually sending himself home because he missed his son, James, his 4-year-old son at the time, James. And the question on a lot of people's minds, because there was a particular episode where there was a conversation about if the two did make it to the end, where they might live. And it seemed like he might have not answered the question of whether he would be willing to leave Ohio. Here's what he told us he actually said to Katie Thurston in that moment. Now, the way it was edited, at least, it looks like you don't answer Katie's question about whether you are open to leaving Ohio. Did you answer her question? What happened there?
Yeah, I actually did answer it because I think you did a little piece on that or something, like I dodged the question, and I'm not that savvy, unfortunately. I told her, I remember this, basically Katie and my relationship got off to a very quick start. It really wasn't until after our one-on-one until everybody saw that connection. But I think night 2, which I hadn't gone on any dates or anything, we start talking about, where would we live, like our jobs, our goals, aspirations, like real questions. If this thing's expedited, like you better get down to it really quickly. And we discussed where we would live. And I remember the first time I answered it, I said I was flexible mainly in the Midwest, like Chicago and things like that. And then later on in the season, I came back to her and I admitted that, I'm not flexible at all. Like my community's here, James's support's here, his school's here. I mean, my sister lives down the street. And it was after I just started thinking about, how I got to the place I am today and all the support that I needed. I didn't feel like it was the right answer to give it to her at that time. So we talked about it often. And she was willing to move to Akron. She said it multiple times. It just wasn't aired.
Okay, I was gonna say Northeast Ohio is pretty great. I've been in a couple other places. I like it here. It's nice.
I like it too. I love this spot.
Interesting peek behind the scenes there from Michael Alio, or Michael A, as a lot of people have come to know and love him. And to bring you up to speed here, Katie Thurston did break off her engagement with Blake Moynes. So for all we know, she is a single lady right now. And so, people might be wondering, have any sparks reignited between Katie and Michael? Because at the end of the season, during the Men Tell All special, he did say that he would definitely be interested in pursuing things again with Katie in a different environment outside of that reality television world. Remains to be seen if anything will happen there. But she did recently post, another huge pop culture moment happening in the world right now is that Taylor Swift has re-released her album Red. It's called Taylor's Version now, sort of taking back the music that she had said she wanted to be able to buy previously. Long backstory there, so if you're not up to speed. Regardless, Katie Thurston had posted some songs from that album, and she was dedicating them to different men from her season. To give you an example, one of the ones that she dedicated to Blake was We Are Never Ever Getting Back Together. Seems like that breakup's pretty fresh, so we can understand that. But the one that she dedicated to Michael Alio was one that is about wanting to get back together with someone, but feeling like you can't do it, and saying sort of, every time I think about calling you, I don't do it, but I almost do. The song is called I Almost Do. So that was not that long ago. That was just last week or so. So if you want some insight into how Katie might be feeling about Michael, go ahead and listen to that song. And and also recently we had Spencer Williams on the podcast. He's from Cleveland. He was just on Michelle Young's season of The Bachelorette, and another person that we're following is Rick Leach Jr. He is still on Michelle Young's edition of The Bachelorette, competing for her love right now. So we recap that every week, but we expect to have him on the podcast too. So stay tuned for that. But that's just a quick trip down memory lane in what has been a very exciting year for me. And I have really enjoyed, having these conversations with these people, getting your questions answered, and really connecting with you guys across Northeast Ohio. And every single week, we also tell you what you need to know in Northeast Ohio. So this is no exception. And we are going to talk about something a little fun that I got to do last week. So this company is called Ohio City Pizzeria. And it's not just any pizzeria. It is a pizza place that's actually tied to the Westside Catholic Center. So what the company does is it employs people who need work, who are without homes, and gets them working at the Ohio City Pizzeria. And they do a fun thing every year. They actually opened about 6 months before the pandemic, so they did have a bit of a rough go of it at the start, but they persevered, they worked through that, And now they do something very fun every year that's tied to Cleveland Pizza Week. So they have some local personalities get together and sort of create their own pizza. So I got to create my own pizza and compete against a couple other local personalities to see whose pizza might win. And then whoever's pizza wins is on the menu for the next year. So my pizza was called the Slice Up Your Life Pizza, and it was garlic sauce, red sauce with crushed red peppers mixed into the red sauce, lots of provolone cheese, a little bit of spinach, some banana peppers, some fresh diced tomatoes, and then topped off with a balsamic drizzle, and then a little more garlic sauce on the top. And you guys, my mouth is watering just describing it to you. Obviously, I created the pizza, so I'm biased, but it was so good. And their dough is actually really good too. You know, in the Haney house, we are big pizza fans. I know we've talked about on previous podcasts how our pizza oven pizza in Canton is our favorite, and how I would have that actually shipped out to me for my birthday in New York and Los Angeles. Well, anyway, so that was a lot of fun for me. Got to do that last week. I did not win, though, unfortunately. The winner went to Mary Santora, and she is a comedian. She's very funny. Her pizza is called the Miss Mary Mac Pizza, and it's basically a Big Mac pizza. So it's a Thousand Island dressing, ground beef, white onion, and American cheese, and then it's topped with lettuce and pickles. The judges they were obsessed with it. They absolutely loved it. So if you want to check that out, you can get that at Ohio City Pizza for the next year. Their website, by the way, is ohiocitypizzeria.org, and you can find them on Twitter. It's Ohio City Pizza. Speaking of Twitter and the social media accounts, of course, you know, every week for the last year, we've been giving you a good follow on social media. And in honor of her winning the pizza contest, this week's good follow for our 1-year anniversary is comedian Mary Santora. And she's very funny, you guys. She's hilarious. You'll love her on Twitter. You'll love her on Instagram. Her Twitter name is Mary_Santora. And her Instagram is Mary Santora Comedy. Of course, those will be linked in the show notes. They'll be linked in WKYC.com. And if you're watching this, they'll be linked on the YouTube video of this video podcast. And she's really blowing up, you guys. She's got an album out. It's called Hillbilly Bougie. It's a comedy album. She's on the Alan Cox Show. She's just great. She's a great follow on social media. Couldn't recommend it more. It will definitely be a fun addition to your feed, for sure. And she's posting clips now of some of her stand-up too, so you can get a peek into what her stand-up is like in case you can catch her at a show. She performs around town here. She performs as well on the road, so when she is in town, you can catch her here. You know, maybe you can plan a little road trip to go see her sometime too, if you want to get a little Cleveland flavor when you are out of town. And you guys, that's it for this week's 3 Things to Know podcast, our 1-year anniversary. And I couldn't be just more excited to celebrate that with you guys. Thank you so much for being here. As always, if you're enjoying the show, please subscribe, leave a rating, leave a review so that we can be here for another 365 days and connect with more people here in Northeast Ohio. I appreciate you guys so much. Hey, have a wonderful Thanksgiving week, because that's what week it is. Wow, time is flying. Can't believe it's almost 2022. That's a conversation for another day. Okay, have a good one, guys. I will see you back here next time with more 3 Things to Know. I'm Stephanie Haney.
Thanks for listening to 3 Things to Know with Stephanie Haney from WKYC Studios. Subscribe now to stay in the know.